When you imagine the fall of Rome, painful scenes come to mind. Barbarians looting homes, legions scattered in every direction, emperors assassinated in their unparalleled palaces. Empires never collapse in an instant. They melt away quietly and slowly, and often the melting begins with money. Rome did not fall merely because enemies attacked or politicians became corrupt. It fell because the currency that reflected the trust-built strength of its economy silently eroded and lost its value. This aspect of the story feels strikingly modern. Let's go back to the beginning. For centuries, the backbone of Rome's economy was the silver denarius. First minted around 201 BC, it was nearly pure silver. Soldiers were paid with it, merchants wanted to hold it, families invested their savings in silver. The denarius was more than an ordinary coin. Those who possessed it felt secure. Rome was unshakable, and so was its currency. As long as there was faith in the empire, there was faith in its currency. But sustaining an empire is never that simple. Armies must be paid, borders must be secured, roads, aqueducts, and public works are the responsibility of the empire, and none of these are cheap. By the 2nd century AD, Rome controlled vast territories. Germanic tribes pressed in from the north, and the Parthians stirred in the east. Strains within the administration were beginning to surface. The situation worsened. Tax revenues no longer covered military expenses. The emperors made a decision, one that governments throughout history have often made. Instead of raising taxes and angering citizens, they quietly reduced the silver content in the denarius. At first, it seemed to work. Under Augustus, the coin was nearly 95% silver. By the early 3rd century under Caracalla, it had fallen to around 50%. Under Gallienus, it dropped to less than 5%. Imagine that! A coin once made of genuine silver had become a bronze core thinly coated with silver. The public realized the deception. They could feel it in the color. They could hear it in the sound it made when dropped. And once trust is broken, what follows is the wreckage it leaves behind. Prices soared, not because of abstract theory, but because the currency had lost its value. Wheat that once cost 1 denarius now cost dozens. Soldiers demanded higher pay to keep up with rising living costs. Merchants became reluctant to accept debased coins. Some turned to barter, others demanded gold. The economy effectively reverted to barter. In an atmosphere of distrust, metal or paper meant nothing. And here was the problem. As trust disappeared, the government accelerated money production. They believed that producing more currency would calm the chaos. Of course, it did not. It only expanded the crisis. Then came the crisis of the 3rd century. Between AD 235 and 284, chaos reigned. Invasions, secessions, civil wars, plagues, emperors overthrown and murdered in rapid succession. But beneath all of this was a deeper structural damage, the destruction of the monetary system. Tax revenues became meaningless because the money itself was worthless. Farmers abandoned their land to escape taxes. Trade networks fractured. The government tried everything: price controls, forced labor obligations, harsh edicts. In AD 301, Emperor Diocletian issued an edict setting maximum prices for over 1,000 goods and services. The penalty for defiance was death. The result was disastrous. You cannot restore value to a worthless currency through laws. Black markets expanded. Official trade nearly collapsed. Eventually, the empire was forced to abandon the denarius. Around AD 312, Constantine introduced the solidus, a nearly pure gold coin that maintained stability in the Eastern Roman Empire for centuries. And the Western Empire? It was effectively looted and abandoned. Rome did not fall for a single reason. It fell from a slow-moving financial decay. And this is where the story reaches across centuries into the present. These policy mistakes did not end with Rome's fall. After World War I, Germany faced massive war reparations. To escape debt, the government printed money. In 1923, hyperinflation struck. Bread that once cost 1 mark before the war now cost billions of marks. Citizens carried wages in wheelbarrows. Lifelong savings were wiped out. In the early 2000s, Zimbabwe followed a similar path. Inflation spiraled out of control. The currency collapsed and eventually was abandoned. Even the dynamics of developed economies play similar roles. In 1971, the United States abandoned the gold standard. The dollar was no longer tied to a tangible asset, but to trust in the government. From that point on, the money supply steadily expanded, debt increased, purchasing power quietly declined. There were no wheelbarrows of cash, but the pain of rising prices is felt. You understand that buying a home feels nearly impossible. You see that your savings buy fewer assets over time. The game is subtle. Inflation is presented as growth. Debt is framed as investment. A rising stock market is sold as proof of prosperity, even though most citizens own little stock. And value slowly shifts from the saver to the debtor, from the worker to the asset holder, from the citizen to the system. What makes this era risky is scale. Rome's crisis was regional, Weimar was national, Zimbabwe was local. Today, the entire world runs on fiat currency, massive debt, and central banks ready to print trillions in times of crisis. If trust fractures across continents, the damage will not remain local. And if history is any guide, the cost will not fall on elites, but on wage earners, retirees, and savers. So, what lessons should we take from Rome? First, inflation is not always an accident. It is often the outcome of policy. Second, wealth is not numbers on a screen. Machines that produce, skills, land, businesses, these are real assets that retain value even if currency does not. Third, never assume stability is permanent. A Roman in the 1st century would never have believed his coin could become worthless. A German in 1913 could not imagine hyperinflation. In the 1980s, Zimbabweans believed they were on a path to becoming a developed nation. They all said it could never happen, until it did. Financial systems do not explode overnight. Like cancer, they spread quietly and weaken gradually, and one day the effects become visible and shocking. When trust in money disappears, contracts fail, trade falters, institutions erode, the state loses legitimacy. But the real fracture begins much earlier, inside the treasury. And finally, history does not repeat word for word, but its melody rhymes. Write this down. If you do not understand how money can lose its value, you will miss the warning signs if it happens again, and you will not react in time. And when you finally realize what is happening, I'm sorry, but it will already be too late. If this has given you a new perspective, keep expanding your horizons by subscribing. History repeats itself. I will show you clearly and distinctly how past centuries relate to the present. God be with you.